The opinions expressed by tonight's guest do not represent the opinions or position of Spaced Out Radio, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with SOR Media. Listener discretion is advised. Here at Spaced Out Radio, we are about to take you higher. Broadcasting from the Rocky Mountains of Colorado to you listening around the world. This is Spaced Out Sunday with host Tessa Nicole Thomas. You can follow Tessa on our Facebook page at Spaced Out Radio, on Twitter at TessaTNT, and you can subscribe to her YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio for the archive. But we break on command 'cause women rule the world. Buckle up, space travelers. Let the countdown begin.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's time to go for a ride with host Tessa Nicole Thomas. I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this
time... Good evening, space travelers. Adjust your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a Rocky Mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 419.9 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, June 9th, June 10th for those of you on the East Coast and beyond. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Hope you're having a rockin' weekend, an awesome day, and an even better evening. I am your host, TessaTNT, and I am live tonight broadcasting from beautiful Bayfield, Colorado. We are 150,000 strong nightly on Spaced Out Radio Network, spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, Paranormal Radio, TalkStream Live, 99.1 FM, WQEE in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead, 107.7 UPRN in New Orleans, Louisiana, 93.7 FM, KZFX TuneIn Radio, 10:30 a.m. KDUN Radio, Revolution Radio, which you can find at revolutionradio.com. Don't forget to head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, where you can peruse the Spaced Out Radio store and read the encounter online, dealing with everything strange, paranormal, and odd. So tonight, I have a treat for all my guys and gals out there. Tonight, we will be talking to and getting to know Mr. Kevin Ian Beegle. Kevin Ian Beegle is an Irish-American folklorist who lectures on paranormal experiences and the correlation to ancient stories and legends. Holding a master's degree in education, Kevin's thesis was focused on Native American educational outcomes and using folklore and legends to show common human experiences. Stemming from an extraordinary experience that Kevin had as a young boy in Northern Ireland, he has spent his life traveling the world listening to elders and storytellers to try to explain this cultural terms. Holding a bachelor's degree in science, he has also tried to explain experiences in those terms, with a special interest in the ancient idea of the green man, an idea that has been a pervasive idea in the world as veneration of the nature spirits. This also has led Kevin to visit pagan sites and their repurposing by the Christian church and some of the pagan echoes that are part of modern culture. Kevin has lectured on many subjects on fairy lore as connected to the UFO phenomena, the history of Irish soldiers and their experiences in World War I, and the worldwide history and variations of the Sasquatch or wild man of the woods. Kevin has been honored to present his knowledge of World War I on the battlefields in France to members of the British royal family, as well as many Northern Irish politicians. These experiences have allowed Kevin to hold advisory roles in cross-community peace projects, such as the Ferris Organization and the SOMI Association in Northern Ireland. The emphasis of the project focusing on shared histories rather than cultural division. Kevin has researched megaliths around the world. These structures have a magnetic energy field that can be measured, and Kevin theorizes that these energy fields were used as a network of portals that could break into what the ancients would call the between world, or to modern thought could break the bonds of time and material world. World folklore is full of time-shifting phenomena, and this could explain claims of witnesses who see prehistoric animals that seem to bleed into this world, such as the thunderbird and lake monsters. A contributor to several books on history and Bigfoot, he weaves together personal experience, ancient culture, and current paranormal research into a lecture that takes both quantum physics and shamanistic explanations to allow the participant to come to their own conclusions or give additional areas to personal research. Hey, Kevin, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on tonight.
Oh, hello. How are you, Tessa? I'm going to have to
Good.
give my mom a raise for writing that.
Right? She deserves it.
Yeah, because, well, she's a well-spoken lady, but, the thing that's interesting about it's all true as far as that goes, and I'm so honored to be here with you and everybody around the country to talk about some different experiences. As we were talking about before the show, I'm going to give things from my perspective, other people's perspectives that I've interviewed for certain topics. And so, take it with a grain of salt sometimes if it doesn't necessarily agree with your outlook on life. It's only because, sometimes we have a hard time understanding the universality of some of the different concepts. So some people get offended that I compare Irish folklore to a Native American folklore. That's not my intent. It's just to show that a lot of these things are the same. And it's not to say one's better than the other.
Well, and they do kind of, have the same parallel, and a lot of things in the paranormal realm are similar. And it's funny how, like you're saying, in different cultures, it's quite similar. Well,
exactly. One of the things that I find with Bigfoot is specifically it's a worldwide phenomenon. There's not one continent other than Antarctica that doesn't have some kind of a story about a big hairy creature that stalks the woods. And so when you start to really look at the things that are similar about that, it's amazing to me about a lot of the different characteristics that are similar and the things that how we get to that. Also with little people, fairies or leprechauns or whatever, very, very similar experiences that sometimes people don't put the two and two together. But that's one of the things that I've done is try to really look at ancient stories to try to talk about how realistically we're more similar than we are different. And, I've made the case in several different things that alien abductions, fairy abductions have so much in common as far as the loss of time, what comes to get you, the way that beings look, and everything like that, that if you compare in some ways the way that some people treat the Fae and some people treat the gray aliens, very similar. And we'll talk about that.
And I've had a lot of paranormal experience throughout life, and even dealing with little people. And I've always believed in fairies, but I never came in contact until we had a case that was dealing with it. And it was awesome that our team was so diverse, and we have druids on our team as well, and they were very fluent in, what you actually do to appease these little critters. And it's really quite simple, but I was so glad to have them there and have the knowledge that they had to be able to help these people through their dilemma.
Right. And I think you're right, Tessa. I think you're right on the mark that, there are some different, characteristics of little people. When we talk about Fae, Irish Fae and Scottish Fae, the way that Scottish people look at Fae is a lot crueler than the Irish approach. In Ireland, whenever we talk about Fae, we call them the good people or the gentlemen or something like that. A lot of that is because it's not because we are honoring them. It's because we don't want to talk bad about them because we understand in a lot of ways they're more powerful than us and they don't like to be talked about. And so that's one of those things where, you always, people will say, well, why you call them the gentlefolk? Why you call them the happy people or whatever? It's because you're trying to give them a quasi nickname so that you don't refer to them as fairies in itself, because they don't like to be disrespected in that way. Throughout lore, and most of the times people do. And so a lot of stories that you have in Scotland about fairies, where they seem to be a lot crueler to fairies, it sort of bites them in the butt. But you can look at different stories, the Mi'kmaq people of northeastern in Canada, northeastern United States and into Canada. They have little people and Bigfoot stories together, and so that's interesting to me for a lot of reasons, because I look at history from a totally different perspective. I realize that probably Vikings were trading in North America for far, far longer than we know. Archaeologically speaking, we could prove that now, although nobody ever talks about it. And so, we've had sort of this global approach to a lot of these different ideals for a long, long time. Megalithic research was part of that because, dolmens, which are the three standing stones with a big slab on top of it that you can find all over the United States, all over Ireland and Scotland, which is where predominantly everybody thinks they are. But they're all over the world, and to be honest with you, there's more dolmens in Korea than there is in Ireland. I mean, that's where you find that. So it's a worldwide phenomenon, and these types of stones that people were using, during the day, the magnetic forces of the stones build up. You can measure that. I've been part of that in France. I've been part of that in Ireland. And during different types of the month, you can also see that this magnetics appears, expands and contracts, and that's kind of an interesting thing about it is that we don't talk about that in context of the everything. In other words, to me, and I don't know, this is it. I throw a wide net over everything: time travel, space travel, all these different types of things are of the human condition. And, Bigfoot and UFOs and all these things are somewhat related in my view, because it's part of the hidden knowledge. And once you start to get into hidden knowledge and things that are hidden away from us, and stories of the ant people and the Hopi legends and the Zuni and things like that, those are things that are held by a very close group of people. However, whenever you talk to elders on that, you can say, "Oh man, I was in Lapland, and they tell me the same story, and it's just got a different name to it." Or you can go to Peru, and they tell you the same story, and it's just got a different filter on it. And so, that's been my approach, and I've been lucky enough to go around the world and to search for this. And I'll tell you why it happened, Tessa. Now that everybody kind of knows that, I'm a fairly well educated dude, and I take efforts to try to bring people together. One of my very first memories when I was a child was having a experience with either a leprechaun. At the time, I believed it was a leprechaun. That's how it was explained to me. My family had a long history of living in this village and used to go up to the woods behind the village where there's a megalithic stone and, do their, blessings on the stone and everything like that. And one of the days when we were up there, my mom used to take me up there to gift things to the fairies. And one of the things that we used to take up there was acorn cups full of honey. And it's sort of a placation type thing, and you're giving a gift. And there was fairy orchids that were up there too. It was one of the only rare places in that area that had that. And so, but this thing popped out of the bushes around this tree that we used to do this on this one time. And it was a 2 to 3 foot tall gray-green being with no clothes on, no genitalia, long spindly arms, big head, eyes that were big and black. And it was the typical little green man. A lot of us think that to us, we always make the case that leprechauns are little men who wear green. But I think that's a mistranslation from the Irish, again, which is little green man. And so, it came to the thing where it was like so bizarre that this thing was bipedal and was running around in the woods, ran away. I lost after it after seeing it for several seconds. I came down to, and I'll give you an idea. I'm about 50. Okay. And so this happened to me before, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Okay. So that's that type of archetypal thing where you say, well, grays are examples of this, and that, people will make that claim that are skeptics that, oh, well, that's just popular zeitgeist getting into a child's mind, and this is what's happening. But that was before that. I went down and talked to my aunt who lived in the village for a long time previous to that, and my great aunt too. I was related to everybody in the village, but anyway, that's how it goes in a small Irish town. But anyway, but she showed me the notes where she had seen the same thing in the 40s and the 50s, and they described it exactly the same way. They called it a porcelain face. That's how she described it, with little slits for a nose that didn't move, and no ears, and spindly arms. And I mean, so it was like this had been something that they had seen for generations. And of course, this is why my family went up there for years to do that. Of course, if you believe in fairy lore, you're trying to placate those beings so that they don't come and get you. And we had different things that you do if a fairy wind comes and blows over you, you're supposed to lay down so it doesn't take you away. And fairy abductions were like that. There's old stories that I used to find in different languages and things like that. Well, Irish language, and they would talk about copper cauldrons or things that were huge. I mean, you got to understand that in Druidic times and pagan times, cauldrons were basically a sign of wealth, and so you could put a person in it. They were huge and massive, and they were a sign of wealth. And so they used to talk about copper cauldrons with little people in them flying around, coming down, putting people in it, taking them away for several days, and then them coming back, not realizing that time had passed, and that and so they felt like they were gone for 15 or 20 minutes or an hour or whatever. They were gone for a week. And this is the type of thing that you have all over in this kind of history, is that Yeah, it's it's very, very similar to the Travis Walton experience, for example. He gets taken into this thing that looks like a huge metal cauldron, and takes him away, and he thinks he's gone for 3 hours. He's gone for 5 days, and so that's one of those things. I always say Roswell is important only because of the fact that it's the demarcation line for a lot of people between modern UFO experiences and ancient fairy experiences. Fairy experiences got a little bit out of whack in some ways because, the English idea of these fairies at the bottom of the garden and that Victorian sort of Disneyfication of Tinkerbell and things like that. And that's okay because fae or she can take any shape. In other words, I used to make the thing that they're elementals. In other words, Bigfoot to me could be an elemental spirit. And so a lot of times people say that now is that Bigfoot is this creature that comes through interdimensional portals and comes through these different types of things. But basically they were talking about Woodlouse and Green Man that could come into reality and leave. And you find that in certain Native American lore too, that there was almost describing it in an interdimensional way where it's a two-dimensional being that can turn sideways and you can't see it. So, these are types of things. Now, you can look at it from an ancient aliens perspective and say that's just, as Giorgio Tsoukalos would say, that's the way of explaining something that they don't know how to explain in those terms. But I look at it from the same standpoint and say, yeah, that's a similar experience. In other words, it just didn't start. We've been doing this for forever. And you can look at old paintings and in caves all over the place, and at Ayers Rock or Uluru, as they call it now, in France. I mean, you've got examples of space aliens and things coming to the planet for forever and a day. And, how do these people get this knowledge? I was in Western Africa. I talked to the Dogon people, and those were the people who said, well, we come from Sirius B, before anybody believed in Sirius B, and it wasn't until after the fact that you could get to the point where you could prove that existed, that they were right the whole time. And of course, a lot of times whenever you're dealing with all these different types of things, we and it's unfortunate, we as European people kind of had a colonial pat on the head way of looking at these people, native indigenous people, and Irish people were that way too for a long time. It's like I used to refer to them as the pat on the head people. That's a nice story. Thanks for telling us that, but that doesn't have anything to do with gravity or time or whatever, because that's not the way we look at the world. Although we are trying to look at the world in that way now due to quantum physics. And so if you start to take quantum physics into it, the shamanic journey is very quantum physical. And so we're making the round again, although science, Newtonian science, tries to fight it as much as possible. But that's the way life is.
Right, and we're learning something new every day, and a lot of us are learning that what we were taught in school is incorrect. Whoever has the best story gets to publish the books or whatnot. But yeah, it's very interesting, the different things that are coming out, and it seems like knowledge is just increasing at an accelerated rate. And it seems like instead of us progressing, a lot of us are digressing. I don't know, that's just what it seems to me. Like, it seems like we're moving backwards instead of forwards, and it doesn't make sense to me because we have all this knowledge at our fingertips, and you could just look anything up on the internet anymore instead of having to go check out a book. It's right at your fingertips, anything you want to learn. And it's astonishing what we can do today that we weren't able to do in history, basically.
I agree with you in a lot of ways. But I think that I'm even going to refer to again, this is how I deal with things. This is how I think of things. Things kind of develop in my mind as we go along. Even listening to your guest last night about Knights Templar and how these things are hidden away and everything like that, you can really see what the point of it is. In other words, at some point in time, we do have knowledge that is hidden from us by somebody who says we're not ready to know that. In other words, if, for example, you could get a hold of the Ark of the Covenant, or the Lance of Longinus, which is what the Nazis used to be all over the place for, doing the Indiana Jones type stuff, looking for. If they could get a hold of that, at what price does that have for humanity? And so I think in a lot of ways is this being hidden from us because we're not ready yet, or is it because somebody believes that we are, and is it just going to show up whenever it needs to be? This is kind of the moral question that comes along with it. Yeah, we can find out a lot of different things, and I think we are exposed to a lot more. And you will find that as people wake up to things, the pushback from the other part of it, they don't like that. Again, that's one of those things where in 1340, if I would have said I was a Christian Druid or a Celtic Christian, I would have been nailed up on a cross or whatever, because I would have been a heretic, just like they got rid of the Cathars, like they got rid of a lot of the books in the Coptic Christian Church, just like they got rid of a lot of that different stuff. And so, but this is the type of thing that some of that is always saved and is put into our traditions of now, whether we understand what they are or not. I mean, that's one of the things that I think people don't understand is a Christmas tree is not a Christian thing. It's not at all. I mean, a Yule log is a pagan thing. A Christmas tree is a pagan thing. That has to do with the green man, the end of the death of the year and the birth of the new year, almost the death of the world and a rebirth. That the sun, basically goes to a certain point, dies for 3 days. That's whenever goes in from retrograde to stasis, and then starts to go into the other way. And so that's it. Is that got to do with Christianity or not? That's happy. That's fine. But basically, if you put a lot of research into it, I think that we do find that truth will come out, and it's not denigrating Christianity at all, believe me, because it's from that standpoint, I think Jesus was one of the most important people that ever lived on the planet. But do we know exactly what he was like? And to question that is a rare thing, but the Bible doesn't address that. There's 20 years that Jesus was gone, and you don't know what he was up to. So that's not anti-biblical to say that he could have been learning all kinds of different doctrines and things like that.
Yeah, and like you're saying, when you're taken, time seems different to us here on Earth than it does in these different realms, whether it's the fairy realm or alien realm, or maybe they're connected. Perhaps to him it was a shorter time. For us, it seemed like 20 years.
Yeah. I think you're right, Tessa, in the fact that, again, this is one of the things that we fight wars over, and get in huge political debates over. Is the Earth 4,000, 6,000 years old, or is it billions of years old? Well, it's relative, right? Albert Einstein said that. If you create the universe, how long is time for God? Depends on where he's at in the universe. If he's not on the planet, if he's not on Earth, a day is sort of, whatever it is. You don't necessarily know. And yet we come to the conclusion that certain people say, that was an Irish guy that came up with that anyway, too, by the way. It was Bishop Ussher came up with the idea that it started, on October the 24th at 6 p.m., and that was a very definite time and date. He can bring it back to that. And so is that important to say? Is that something worth fighting about now that we understand what time is? And Albert Einstein said time is relative to where you are and how fast you're traveling. Obviously, if you're 100 light years away from here, time is not the same as it is. A day is not the same on Mars as it is on Earth. We know that. It's a fact. So there's no point in arguing about it. It's all relative, and that's not saying that there's anything wrong with anything. And so we have to embrace a lot of different traditions that we have and bring it together, in my opinion, because there's knowledge in everything. There's always knowledge in every kind of a group. But, this is the difference between natural science and quantum science, and they don't always get together. They don't like it. If you talk about Bigfoot to a natural scientist who says it's flesh and bone and it might be Gigantopithecus and it might be this, and those records are there to do that. That's a totally different concept to somebody who says, well, could it be an interdimensional being? Those people, they don't like each other. They don't. One's theoretical and one's practical. So how do you get around that argument? And so one of the things that's interesting is that I talked to both types of groups in nuts and bolts spaceship stuff and interdimensional space travel, and Bigfoot as being flesh and blood and Bigfoot as being a spiritual being. My thing is, what if it's both? And people don't like that, because I say, what if it's one and the other? What if there's two different types of things? And I don't like that. But they accept that I come up with that, and I respect their views. And so that's one of those things that's interesting. But where you're at, you're in a magical place in the Four Corners. I mean, you've got to be full of just magical energy where you're at, ley line energy. I mean, that kind of place that you're at is just amazing, with some of the different archaeological things that are there and some of the stories that are there. The western side of the Rockies. I mean, I saw Bigfoot in the Rockies in Colorado. It blew my mind away. It blew me away. So it's bizarre. And so that's one of those things. But I think you'll agree with me, Tessa, that if you're kind of sensitive to that, you almost start to experience things that most people don't. It's like I've never had an experience, or I've had all those experiences. Is that how you really look at it? Which is weird. Like, have you had a ghost experience and a UFO experience and a fairy experience and a Bigfoot experience? Or is that, do you talk to people like that and it's almost like it's too much? It's a weird thing.
Yeah, they just kind of look at you like you're crazy. and it, I don't know, that's, when I was younger, I was brought up that this sort of stuff was normal. Our family had dealt with all kinds of different paranormal things. My mom was very gifted. She's the Cherokee side, my dad's the Irish side. And grew up in Arkansas, ended up moving out to Colorado when I was in 4th grade. And, I've had experiences everywhere, in Washington as well. And all the different places that I've lived, there seems to be something somewhere. There's always something there. But it's been very interesting. But you got to learn, as a child especially, who you can talk to and who you can't. Because, like I said, some people will just kind of retract and like, ugh, this person's weird. And I don't think it's weird at all. It's, paranormal. It's normal, but not normal to everyone. I don't know if it's just because people don't have the same gifts or different... I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain as far as why do certain people see things and why do others not. Is it because it was kind of nurtured in you as a child, and for others the door was kind of closed for them, and so they weren't able to open up their eyes to certain things? I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I'm very grateful for all the experiences that I've had.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was lucky in the fact that it wasn't talked about like it was weird. Not that it was right or anything like that. It wasn't wrong. I guess that was the kind of thing. I had the permission to see it, and that was never taken away from me. And it's kind of interesting, sometimes when you meet certain people. I was watching Daryl Sims, the alien hunter guy, not long ago, and he talks about a lot of the fact that, a lot of the people who seem to experience this seem to be a hybrid of Irish and Native American bloodstock. I don't know if that's accurate or anything like that, but it is strange in the fact that I did some DNA research, and there is a type of genetic code that seems to be in Northern Europeans and some Native American stock that is not tracked yet. And so, if I was talking to the medicine chief for the Blackfeet Confederation, I was lucky enough to talk to him for quite a long time, and he said, yeah, no, they're out to get it. They're after our genetics. It was kind of an interesting thing. He didn't make a point that it was about a certain type of thing, but at least in that response, he was making the point that he felt that they were part of the genetics of at least his tribe was unearthly, like they're not from the earth, and so it was a kind of an interesting thing. And whenever I was talking to him about Bigfoot, that was the same type of thing. I said, is Bigfoot from the planet? He goes, well, we're not even from the planet, so I don't see how they could be, and that's his point. That's one of those things that you might make into a kind of an over exaggeration. If somebody is marking that story down and then talking about it years down the road, you might not understand the subtleties of what he's trying to say, as the Native American legend saying that, Bigfoot is extraterrestrial. Well, he's also making the point that none of us that are human beings or soul bearers or soul carriers or whatever you want to call it are from here, which is basically sort of that Anunnaki type thing if you go back to that tradition. So these things come from different places and sort of end up in the same place, and that's what's interesting about it. And it's interesting to me that a lot of rituals that I've witnessed and been part of seem to do the same type of things. They're around some stone or rock or whatever. They seem to have a lot of quartz in it. And it seems to hold a lot of magnetic forces. When I was being told, now it's understanding that Druids didn't build Stonehenge. Okay, they didn't build Newgrange. They didn't build most stone circles or menhirs or anything like that. But they used them. They used them for certain things. So there's a prehistoric people that we don't really know that much about that made all these different types of things. And it has been used by people over and over and over again. You can see that in Ireland. This prehistoric people, this Mesolithic, Neolithic people built these things. We don't know how they did it. Stone Age people built all these different types of things. Then any sort of other people that came in started to use it. And then whenever the church came in, they started to use it. I mean, that's one of those things where whenever they started to define ley lines in England, the guy who came up with it said, basically, it was easy for him to track because he just went from one church to the next church to the next church to the next church, and it was all in a straight line. So he could project these ley lines in that way just by looking at holy sites. And so when we look at that, I'll say what I've learned from this is that a lot of times you look at these old stories about Celts or pagans or Picts in Scotland or whatever. I think Outlander is the newest series that talked about time travel from stone circles and things like that. I will say this, that dancing around stone circles at night is pointless. We were always taught that the stones sleep at night and wake up in the morning. In other words, just before dawn, that's whenever they release their energy. You can also track them at certain types of the moon cycle. So, these things are made for toroidal flow and different types of things like that. In other words, the idea that a lot of people used to manifest energy and used to depict those as snakes or dragons. I know that and this also comes to the worldwide example of snakes and dragons, which is using earth energy. That's one interpretation of it. That's not everybody's interpretation of it. So I'm not saying what it is. But if you look at all these different things, whenever St. George kills the dragon, whenever you see all these different types of things, St. Patrick banishing the snakes from Ireland, which actually, there was never any snakes in Ireland, but that's not the whole point. It's a metaphorical thing talking about the worship of the energy of the nature versus the worship of a being, a deity, or whatever. So that kind of thing starts to go from that. And so again, ley line energy, those different types of things, you can go to that. I know people who say they see that energy. I can't, but I think that I can feel it at certain point in time. But some people say they see it. Aboriginal people in Australia, they hear it, which is a very, very weird thing. It's so there's some kind of an energy vibration that they're picking up, whether that's through energy or anything like that, but that's what they do. So you can actually, I've seen this happen where if they can walk through the desert for days or go to one site that's connected to another site, and they can send messages back and forth to each other, and it's incredibly canny, the fact that if they're going along these lines that they can hear, that with 90% accuracy, they get to where they're going without having to move off. But if there is no sacred space in the thing, they get, there's a 50% chance that they could get lost in the desert. So how is it that they are picking up on things that maybe we've lost? And that's the whole question of, is there something that we're doing have we lost the third eye? Have we lost the pineal gland? Have we lost these different types of things that we probably used to use more than we do now? And is that clogged up by, interference from microwaves and stuff like that? I don't know, but maybe that's one of those things that I think a lot of people can talk about is the fact that we're around radiative sources or energy or EMF or whatever causing some problems for us. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it's very interesting how England actually knew about the ley lines so early in history. It's like, how did they know? And it's been proven that it is there. And for the Aborigines to hear it, it made me wonder, is that where, they created the didgeridoo or whatnot, the humming noise that comes from that? Is that connected in some sort of way? And they feel like that kind of connects them more with the ley lines? But it's so interesting, intriguing how all that works.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story when you talk about Aboriginals and the fact that Ayers Rock, which is that's the English name for it. Uluru is the Aboriginal name for it, but it's a huge, massive piece of stone, and that's like seems to be out of nowhere, out of context, in the way that it is, and they believe that they were star-seeded, and they have no doubt about it. They have no doubt about the fact that they're not from planet Earth, and it's almost like I've heard certain people talk about it like that is where mankind was seeded from, on this massive stone that basically went through the earth, came down and basically buried itself down into Australia. It's almost, and if you look at the geology around the area, it's like a big slab of something hit the earth and basically just buried deep into it. And again, and that's what's interesting about it is, you don't even have to ask those people whether UFOs are real. Because they're offended if you think they're not real. That's almost the way that goes. And I think that's an interesting thing, that when we're talking about if that's true, and I don't know if we've done enough DNA research to see that that isn't true, because Aboriginals have, again, a large part of their DNA makeup that we can't account for at this point in time. And so, and that's it. So there are pockets of people that have been around the planet and, can do things. I've said that about Bigfoot all the time, that, people say to me, well, is it a chimpanzee or is it an ape or whatever? And I say, no, it doesn't seem to me. That's not consistent with stories that people have. In other words, if for it to be a primate, and to, as most Native American stories sometimes talk about mating with Bigfoot, it couldn't be a primate, because you can't genetically mix a ape and a person, but you can mix a Neanderthal and a person, and you can mix a Denisovan with a person. Denisovan were large, tall beings. Neanderthals were wider than us. And so is Bigfoot a human Neanderthal Denisovan hybrid? I mean, that would make more sense to me than, some ape coming across 100,000 years ago and then all of a sudden changing from eating bamboo to walking around the Pacific Northwest. But, that's not a popular idea, because, from that standpoint, genetically, in order to hybridize with humans and everything like that, they would have to be a lot closer to us than we have. Of course, making that point to people, and even Bob Gimlin, I've talked to him about it. He says, no, they weren't apes. They were people, Bigfoot was a person. And so he says that was a hairy being. He calls them the hill people. He didn't believe that they were apes at all. And so you don't have to trust me on that. I mean, he said that publicly. But, but that's not the popular thing that's been put on in movies. And so at this point in time, the movie depiction of Bigfoot is more important than the actual depiction of Bigfoot. So it's a strange type of thing where we do fight against popular culture in these types of situations where people will react to certain ghosts based on movies, and they will react to certain fairies based on that, or be afraid of leprechauns based on that. Well, again, are leprechauns really that bad, or are they neutral? I mean, it seems to me like from that standpoint, they're just like us. They have free will too, and they don't necessarily like people sometimes. And you talk about baby hybrids with aliens, and the changelings stories that used to say in Europe, where fays would come into your house and steal your baby and replace it with this strangely looking baby, and so people would put up pieces of iron to protect themselves against fairies, because and lots of times people will say that's a throwback there. You'll look at a lot of different houses and they'll have horseshoes on them, and they say, okay, what's that for? It's for luck. Well, it's actually, if you go back far enough, fairies can't cross iron, so they will not come into your house if you put a horseshoe over your house. But then again, that's one of those things where, as stories change, and you'll find that in Iceland and in Norway and everything like that, they were still doing things for fairies in Ireland that they would never talk about, because the church would find that rude. I mean, in other words, you would find a hawthorn bush and you'd put a thing of milk in a saucer under a hawthorn bush, a hawthorn tree, and that was an offering for the fairies. But if somebody came around and asked you about it, you'd say, oh, that's for the cat. And you never had a cat, you didn't know anything about cats, but that's the way that it is. And that mentality of thinking is something that we find that is difficult to come up with. In Ireland, there's hardly a straight road, and they won't go through a fairy hill or a fairy tree or whatever. They won't move it because they're afraid of fairies, and then people say that's so backwards and stupid. But I was in Ireland once, and I was, I knew a lot of politicians, and I knew a lot of different types of things, where we were making this guy had made a stink because they were trying to put a road between these two towns, and they would have had to knock down this fairy bush to get there. And it came up that everybody made a stink about it. And so they diverted around this fairy bush. And so I called him up because I really wanted to get his idea about it. And I said to him, John, I said, do you believe in fairies? And he said, of course not. He said, of course not. I don't believe in fairies. But what if they're real? So that was, that's the way he looks at it is that, he didn't think it was real, but then he's not certain to the point where he's going to take a risk on it. That happened in Iceland not long ago. They knocked a big rock off the road in Iceland, and that supposedly made the elves put a curse on the town, and they had to move it back up. So they bought all the stuff back up, hauled it back onto the road, and a lot of people made fun of them for that. But that's basically their spiritual belief. I mean, you wouldn't allow for that. If somebody says to me, I wouldn't persecute anybody for their religious belief if it's not hurting anybody. And especially in America, you have laws that protect you against that. You have religious freedom, and as long as it's not hurting anybody, you should be able to do it. So to discriminate against somebody because they believe in it is a very odd concept to me, and I understand that's the way that it is sometimes. But it's an interesting thing that we do not realize how belittling people's cultural values or things actually affects them in such a way that makes it hard to get the entire story, because of the fact that these people have to trust in us so much to the point that you're not going to give up the secrets, and that was the way that goes. But I don't know. Is that something that you find too, that you have to be very, very careful about being respectful for a lot of different things, and some people will attack you because you are trying to be respectful?
I think it's important to be open-minded and respectful, not only dealing with human beings, but also spirit and other beings. Like, respect is of the utmost importance, and, sometimes you can be attacked for it, but other times, people or spirits or whatnot really do appreciate it, because there's not a lot of that going on out here anymore. There's a lot of disrespect and people not being open-minded, and they only see one way, and if you're not going that one way, then it's just total utter chaos for them. And April in the chat room was wondering, Kevin, do you believe people are cloned now?
I believe that yeah, I believe that cloning is possible, and if that's happening, it's an interesting thing to me. Some people came to me and said, why would aliens steal us? My wife had an interesting, I wasn't there, but she had this interesting experience that happened to her. She's very, I would say, probably more gifted in natural ability than I am. I think what I have is a learned ability, but I don't think it comes naturally. I think that women really should be the ones who are in charge of these different types of things. I'm not trying to say that to be nice.
Are you trying to kiss butt right now? I'm just kidding.
No, I'm not. But I'm saying that we've lived in a patriarchy long enough that we don't need to do that anymore. That before time began, we didn't live in a patriarchy. If anything, we had a very balanced view of looking at the world. And I think that that's the way that works. The division of labor worked the way it did. And a lot of those different types of things that we say are man tools versus women tools and caves and things like that. We have no idea of actually knowing who it was. It's not like that you find these stone axes and say his and hers on it. So you have no idea. That's us projecting our beliefs of now into the past, and I don't like that. But my point is that she's very, very gifted naturally. I think, Nikki's in the audience. She's another person that's got a lot of gifts that are naturally there, and it's kind of funny that whenever Nikki and I are together, that we kind of bounce ideas off each other. We don't always come to the same agreement, but we kind of get something's coming at the same time. It doesn't always come out to be the same thing. But my wife's like that too, and she was up at Mount Baker. And she said that this light had come, which is interesting because Les Stroud, one of the members of the UFOI team, took a video where the UFO responded to him talking. And my wife was up there, and she had asked the UFO to come towards her, and it basically came at like light speed towards her. And then she said that the light scanned her like a credit card scanner or some kind of a self-checkout thing at the Walmart. And she said, I wonder what they're doing. I said, I think that they're scanning your DNA and so they can make a clone of you.
I hate to cut you off, Kevin, but we do have to go to our first break. You guys don't go
ahead.
anywhere.
I'll finish the story after. Finish the story after.
You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after these messages.
Looking for nighttime adventure? Old school radio that delves into everything out of the norm? Then check us out at Spaced Out Radio. This is Dave Scott. Every Monday through Friday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we're going to take you on a wild ride ranging from conspiracies to true crime and every ghost, alien, and Sasquatch story in between. We're always live, and we're always interactive with you. So join us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, we own the night.
Hey, guess what? You can now get your brand new Spaced Out Radio swag at spacedoutradio.com. We've brought the store back with all new items for you to pick out and pick up for yourself, your family, or friends. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, we got it all. All you have to do is head to our website and click on Store. Choose what you want and it's shipped to you. The Spaced Out Radio store is right there for you. Come shop with us at spacedoutradio.com. Then we can own the night together.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Canada's largest UFO conference is ready to roll in Toronto this September 21st and 22nd at the Alien Cosmic Expo. This year is about the experience. Listen to the stories of Dave Scott, Travis Walton, Paula Harris, Grant Cameron, Ryan Stacey, Richard Dolan, Leslie Mitchell-Clark, and more. Get your tickets now at aliencosmicexpo.com.
Coming soon to our website, spacedoutradio.com, is the SOR Space Travelers Club. For just $5 a month, you can get into a private area on our site where you can hang with other listeners in our chat room, post in our forum, and check out a bunch of exclusive content and store that won't be found anywhere else, including a nightly after-show party with Dave. It's going to be the best $5 a month you're going to spend. The SOR Space Travelers, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
If you're heading to Vancouver, make sure you stop by the official bar of Spaced Out Radio, the Moose Vancouver. It's the place to party in YVR. At the corner of Nelson and Granville, the Moose Vancouver is always up to speed with a kitchen staff that serves great food. All food on the menu, $6.95 to $8.95. There's a reason the Moose Vancouver is recognized as one of the hottest spots on the West Coast. Get your horns up for the Moose Vancouver. Come get spooked at the 4th Annual Forest Moon Paracon in Cedar-Woolley, Washington, Saturday, September 28th. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot. Speakers include Mike Morin and Jason Jordan, R. Keith Andrews, and Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and so much more. There will be workshops and a VIP roundtable. Get early bird tickets now at fmparacon.com.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Every night on Spaced Out Radio, we have places for you to hang out. Hi, this is Carl. Join our SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook for live chat. On Twitter, using hashtag Spaced Out Radio, you can also join us in our Spreaker chat room. Check us out on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR. All of our archives are free on YouTube at Spaced Out Radio. By the way, I'll be watching you at your window until you do. Bye!
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
You can follow Tessa on Twitter at TessaTNT, on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, back to Spaced Out Weekend host, Tessa Nicole Thomas.
Here's a sound again, voices dancing in my head, smile wide, drowning slowly as the echoes rise.
All right, welcome back, guys. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, and we are here with Kevin. Welcome back, Kevin. So great to have you.
Oh, thanks for holding that for me there. I got back to the microphone a little bit late there, but I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody. So I was gonna say that she was scanned by this scanner, and I think it's almost like a situation where it takes everything about you and puts it into some sort of a replicant thing. I think I think that if you can traverse time and space to get here, you don't physically need to abduct anybody to put them on a spaceship. That's just me. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like, having a house that runs on everything that has Alexa for this, that, and everything, and then having a TV with a remote that you have to stand up and turn the knob for, like when we were kids. It just doesn't make sense that you couldn't just replicate people in space. And so it seems to me like that's a logical thing to say, that our people being cloned because of the fact that by other beings in another way, because they want to do genetic testings on us. Maybe some people are more likely to be abducted because they have a genetic structure, and I will say this, and I won't say too much about her, but she does have some genetic characteristics that are odd. And so is that why she is quote unquote being something that you would make a hybrid of, because that's got some basic abilities or understanding or compatibilities with something that they are more compatible with than, say, I would be. I don't know the answer to that, but it just doesn't seem like that not doing that, coming down and taking things. I was talking to a friend who's friends with Christopher O'Brien, and about cattle mutilations, and it's almost like, to me, it seems like they're doing it to prove they can do it more than to do anything with it. It's just to say, hey, listen, that's nice for you guys, and you guys think you're all awesome and stuff, but we can do this whenever we want to, whenever we want to. So we're going to do it just to prove that we can do it. And that's one of those things that it seems to me like, even if you talk about cattle mutilations, there's things written about that in the 1600s about that. In England, there's, and basically that is attributed to fairies. Crop circles in England and Ireland and things like that are attributed to fairies. Whereas now, if we do it and we see a crop circle, it's an alien. So that's a lot of the things that I'm talking about, is that you can go back and you can find these threads throughout time, and it wasn't like, because you mutilated some sheep in a field in England was anything more than saying, listen, you're not the big dog around here. Without, let's put it straight. You're not the end all be all. And so I think that in some cases that's almost what's happening. And that's why a lot of times when people talk about fairies, it's like that's almost that way of that mentality of saying, it's like treat us well, or respect us, or deal with things in that sense. They're not necessarily malevolent, but they're just saying at that point in time, don't be so sure of yourself that you think that you are the apex thing in the universe, because I think clearly we're not. And to understand that, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, it's that I think that is the issue that people will have if disclosure comes out, which is not that aliens exist. I mean, we've been branded that. I mean, Star Wars, Star Trek, Close Encounters, everything like that, Paul, movies like those types of things, that has been droned into us for generations, that I think that if an alien showed up tomorrow, my kid, who's 20, wouldn't even be surprised. He wouldn't even be surprised. Especially if they look like, a gray alien. He wouldn't think it was a big deal. He's killed them in video games. It's all over the thing. It's not here nor there. But what I think is going to be the problem, if there is a problem, is that realization that we are not, as we always like to believe we are, the master of nature. And so that's why I think a lot of the things that we've come to problems with in humanity is because we used to be part of nature. Native Americans were part of nature. That's how they saw themselves, as being part of nature. We used to live in nature. That's how we looked at it. And then we became the dominator of nature. Well, that's not going to work out for humans, because guess the human race might die out. The earth is still going to be here. You know what I mean? So, we are a very, very kind of, hubris type individual race of things, because we believe that, if we're not here, the earth isn't here. No, it's going to live here way past us. It does. The earth doesn't need us. We need it. So we might as well just start to learn that in some kind of a way that makes sense. And that's not, I'm not trying to start some liberal agenda here or anything like that about what we should do. It's just to say that, it will last longer than we will. I mean, technically, there's an old idea that's kind of an interesting thing for me, Tessa, and that's the idea that children, when they're developing, they don't have any concept of time before they exist. In other words, whenever a baby's born, they literally think the universe was created. Like there was no time before that. You gave birth to your child, your daughter, and to her, up until a certain point in time, you were the earth, you were the birthing mother that created the universe. She came out, and that's whenever the universe started. And then she started to understand the concept of time far later than I think we really understand that kids do. And maybe this is part of our development as people, is to realize is that, when we die, the earth doesn't die. You know what I mean? That's us. That's our time's gone. We're leaving. We're leaving on it. But that humanity has been through bottlenecks in time where we have gone from a large amount to a small amount, as little as 3,000 people at one point in recent, sort of history, if you look at geological times, and that we really have gone, we've contracted, shrunk down, and contracted and shrunk down. And is the idea of all of this that, and I make this case a lot of times because I deal with archaeology sometimes as well. Have we been to this point in technology before and blown it? That's the thing that I wonder about all the time. Have we been to this place where, okay, this time we're going to redo it. We're going to get the nuclear bomb, but we're not going to kill ourselves. We're not going to start a war, and we're not going to do this and everything else. Or are we really literally going to go back to the Stone Age where we all, live in caves for a certain amount of time? And you make that argument in places like India and things like that seem to have radiation spectrums that are out of the case. Like there's a nuclear bomb there and an explosion that went off, and you can't account for it. But is this what it is? Is Atlantis really a cataclysmic tale where we have gone from the height of Lemuria to destroy it all, and then start to Atlantis and then destroy it all? Are we getting to that point again where we destroy it all these things that are made out of material and things like that take 10,000 years to dissolve, and you got people living in caves because, we don't know how anything works. I know how to turn on a computer. Some of us will live, you know what I mean? Because some of us will figure out how to make rocks and fire and hunt and everything like that. But the majority of us won't last a month, to be honest with you, because we don't know how to do anything. They don't have caveman Uber Eats. You know what I mean?
Right. What are we going to do?
Yeah, it's like, who's going to deliver the pizza? And so that's the thing that is the thing. So either we understand our place in the universe and to go through that, and is the reason that we think aliens are so evil is because is that projection of us? Because we really know that, when we come in peace, whenever the colonists came to America, what do? We killed everybody and kicked them off. That's what we did. We tried to screw people out of their land, and then we took it over. And so we always assume that if aliens came here, they would act like we act, which is terrible towards one another. So at a certain point in time, we need to figure out whether...
Uh-oh. Did I lose him? I can still see him. Oh, calling him back. Sorry, guys.
Oh.
You're back. I could see you were frozen, but then it started beeping. I guess we lost you.
Oh. Well, you know what happens? That's the government censor saying stop being nice to people.
Right? Enough of this.
Telling people to get along. This doesn't help. Right? It's almost like Democrats and Republicans are actually people, and you should talk to them and not think they're nasty. But anyway, that's my point. Is that from that standpoint, you've got to really look at it from a standpoint of, and Ronald Reagan said that, which is that at one point in time we've got to say to each other, if we were attacked by something from another planet, are we Russian or American or whatever? Are we living on this planet together? And so that's one of those things. I like the Star Trek universe, where everybody gets together and gets on a ship and goes through the planets looking for other things, and we have morals and we don't try to rob people or stuff. I mean, I like that. I mean, if I could wish a future, I'd love that. So I do have a lot of hope for the future. I really do. But but it doesn't help a lot of times when we worry about things or what difference, what's important. What's nice is if this disclosure documents that people are talking about are true, and we've been working on these different types of things, and we can get to that. Can we make that available to everybody? That's almost what I'm afraid of. It really doesn't matter if aliens have been coming here and we can do that and we can send other people to other planets and everything like that. If the average person doesn't have the ability to get a hold of or to take advantage of that, because at that point in time, you know how it is. I mean, it's like nuclear bunkers, like the Briar, the White Briar Hotel in the middle of the mountains. That's going to start, if there's a nuclear attack, they're going to send everybody there, and everybody in government's going to keep on going. Could you imagine that? Like literally everybody in Washington, that's the stock of people we're going to restart the universe.
Yeah, we're going to start off with no hope whatsoever. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and so what's awesome is that the people that we dislike the most en masse are the people who would be, we got to make sure Congress gets to Mars and can live past the apocalypse that's going to come on the planet. I mean, that's ridiculous to me. So from that standpoint, we do have to start to say at a certain point in time, are we equal or not? And so therefore, can we get to a point where if this technology exists, are we going to be able to share in it? Are we going to be able to do that or not? Or is it some sort of corporate governmental issue that basically hides all this stuff from us? And I'm not trying to be anti-governmental, believe me, but I'm just saying that's human nature, and we have to go ahead and assert our rights as human citizens of this planet to say, hey, if we can travel to the stars, I want to be able to do that too. I'm not opposed to that. Let's do it.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary because you're talking about the government, and it seems like every time I've said never, I've done it. And one of the things I always said is I'd never join the military, and I ended up doing it. And one of the things that we were taught is if anything ever does happen, the military, the government, like you're saying, aka citizens, will be taken to a place that's safe and secure, and the civilians will just have to take care of themselves, which to me is ridiculous. Like, we're all in this together, and how is one individual or one group of people better than everybody else? Just because we have training and all this other stuff, how does that make you more worth surviving than everybody on the outside? And I never really trusted my government before, and after that, I really didn't trust it. And there's just so much stuff out there with, this disclosure. I don't know if it's because they don't think we can handle it, or I think it's because they think they can't handle it. If, a small percentage or a large percentage of us completely loses our heads and go, running haywire, what are they going to do? So they just keep these things from us to, I think, not just protect ourselves, but to protect them from what they'll have to deal with.
Right. Because let's look at it from this standpoint, right? Who's it a threat to if aliens show up and say, hey, listen, you can have free energy. You can have this. You can have non-pollutants. We can heal you. We can give you all these different things. We have a way. I mean, obviously, if they're taking us apart and understanding our genetics, they know how to fix it. I mean, let's face it. So who's that a threat to? I mean, if you show up and say, hey, listen, I can give everybody on the planet food and resources and all these different types of things like that, is that bad for us? I don't think as an average person it's bad for me. I really don't think it is. I mean, basically, let's put it this way. You've been in the military. I understand the military a little bit too. And I know where you're coming from. But, I'm going to say it like this. So basically, we've got a system based on an overlord now. That's a human overlord, and basically, they if the crap hits the fan, we know they're going to be all right. We might make it. That's great. But if an alien shows up and says you're replacing one king for another, does that really matter? I mean, did historically speaking, whenever they were fighting wars in Europe over who was going to have this little piece of land, did that make difference to the average dude who was in charge? Yeah, it didn't. They got on with their lives. And so therefore, it's their protection that we're supposed to be involved in, not ours. I mean, I don't think it's going to affect us in the slightest way. If somebody said to us, let's have a real democracy where your rights are guaranteed and everything like that, which I don't think we're in some respects, then, how's that bad for us? How's that a terrible thing? I guess I'm always the type of guy who tries to say, okay, is there good in any situation? And there always is. That's the type of thing that it is. We know that politicians lie. We know that they're into it for their own things. I mean, why not roll the dice and say to these people that come from another planet, maybe you guys are more developed than us, and you'll actually look after us better than we look after ourselves. It's kind of an interesting thing. You have that guy on last night who was talking about injections and everything like that. And then you realize from that standpoint, what are politicians worried about whenever it comes to vaccines? Is it our health, or is it their own legacy of understanding what it is? Are we being told everything for our benefit, or is it for their benefit? In other words, are we suckers in this situation where we spend our tax money to these people who then get told by governments and corporations how to run the country? That smacks of fascism to me. The old idea of fascism was just the government controls the corporations. Well, maybe I'm calling it the wrong things, but if corporations run the government, is that not the same thing? How is it that you've got all these different private entities who have a hold of this material that are supposedly from spaceship, from alien space stuff? I mean, why is it that a private corporation has this type of information? I mean, I don't want to talk bad about any type of group, but let's put it to you this way. How is it that if somebody has alien technology and they're using it and then trying to disclosing it to us that they have it and disclose these different things, how is that of a benefit to us? Why isn't the government managing that? Why is that being used for somebody's economic benefit? It sounds like we're a bunch of suckers, to be honest with you. And I'm not going to go on a political rant, but I'm just saying it doesn't make sense that if the government owns it, we should own it. So therefore, we should benefit from it, not somebody making pods on Mars. That's my opinion, but I'm probably overstepping the bound. You've got an Irish guy on, and so again, I speak my. I get my opinion out there, and understand I'm not, it's not trying to say it, but a lot of these people that sell disclosure to us are part of the machine. I don't understand it. It's like, it's like, here, I'm here from the pharmaceutical company to give you a vaccine. I'm here to help you. Would we believe that? No. I mean, it's the same type of thing. How is it that somebody who is taking this material and making money from it and then going to disclose to us how this all works, how are they honestly going to not look after themselves? We have to expect them to have morals that we don't have. I mean, at some point. Okay, I'll shut up.
Well, it just seems like we're ruled by the almighty dollar, and had I been there back in the day, are we going to go with free energy or are we going to go with paid energy? Somebody out there was saying free energy would have cost us more, which I don't see in the long run. It would have been less. I would have gone for the free energy, and there's so much stuff, like you're saying, that's been kept from us. Like, we should all be a part of it. I think if we all were, we could get further than keeping it to a small group or a corporation, like you're saying. There's so much further that we can be had we not been just leaving it to a small percentage.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I'm going to make the argument about, they'll make the argument that that'll collapse the economy, right? If you give people free energy and free health care and these different types of things, then doctors will lose their jobs, pharmaceuticals will lose their jobs, people who make cars will lose their jobs. All these people are going to lose their jobs. My point of the matter is that's so myopic of an approach that if all these things are happened, then we're going to have to deal with it. But that's something that we have to deal with now anyway. If you look at the idea of, this is the thing that scares me, right? AI is making things now where they basically can predict what a person can do. And I guess that in 30 years, when we were kids, right? Do you remember like the Jetsons? And you would watch the Jetsons and see George Spacely sitting behind his desk, and he'd have to push the button 3 times a day for an hour, and he'd go home. Remember whenever that was going to be the world of the future? Like, we're going to have all this free time. And that was supposed to have happened by now, right? That we were going to be all working like a 10-hour week because of all these different things like that. And now, for some reason, we work more and longer and have to produce more and more stuff than we've ever done, which is good. I mean, it shows to us that human beings are very productive things. But when you have computers that are doing everything, cooking your food and taking your order and driving you around and doing all these different types of things, we're going to have about, in my estimation, according to the Georgia Guidestones, about 9 billion people too many on this planet.
Yeah, we've already gone over the number that was suggested.
Yeah. And so, that's the thing that's the scary part about it is, so who's making all this? And is this a billionaire's boy club that, or that we're just, part of the machinery of? I don't know. I hope not. But it is an interesting thing that we go towards that. We want to make our lives easier, but don't think of the long-term consequences. I think that, when you're in the military and sometimes whenever you're in these different types of things, you have to think 2 steps ahead of the situation whenever you're trying to look at the tactics. What is it that, okay, this all makes sense and that we should do this and we should do that, but what is the long-term thing? And what is disclosure and what isn't disclosure, and what happens whenever you have a double agent or a triple agent, and that's who's trying to disclose this stuff, and therefore, it's not necessarily what it is. We all want to believe disclosure is real, so maybe we shouldn't even comment on it because of the fact that we're too invested in it. Maybe we should take somebody who has not got a lifelong desire to prove that this is real to actually look at it and assess it, these documents, because, some of the things that you look at and you say, okay, this is it. We've got disclosure. This is it. Are we looking at that because that's what we really want to believe? I mean, we've all been in that situation where, hey, you know what? This lady is not for me, or this man or this partner or whatever. But, heck, they're hot and I really want that. So therefore, I'm going to make a big mistake. I know I should know better, but I really want to believe that this is going to be different this time, And so, this is the type of thing that, that I don't think that, in a lot of ways we should assess this because we have too much skin in the game. Our hubris, our ego is involved in proving this is all right, and especially whenever you're trying to say, I've spent my whole life doing this. Like, look at me, like I've been trying to prove Bigfoot is real since I saw one. And that was about 10 years ago. But if I could get to the point where I could prove it was real, I probably shouldn't be commenting on it if I found some documentation that said it was real, because I want it to be real. I want it to be real so bad that does that make it, am I a willing, or as the Russians would say, a willful or a willing idiot at that point in time? Am I just being used by the system to do everything like that, right? Because that's how these things are. When you're dealing with intelligence, and this as well as anybody else, anybody that they're going to use as an asset, they don't necessarily know they're being used as an asset, but they're going to have a psychological program of that person, a profile that says, at this point in time, this person is the right person, and if we drop this, and this, they're going to bite off, and they're going to go charging into the vanguard like the 600 into the valley of death. And it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. That's just, they understand our programming in our brains so well that, okay, I'm going to push this button. And if you think that's wrong, go on Facebook and then type in anything about yourself for a long time, and the algorithm of Facebook knows exactly what you're saying or what you're going to want before you even get there. That's the way that it is. This data, our mind, our way of thinking has been sold to corporations to sell us advertising. So you can't imagine that the government doesn't have that, that at that point in time, they can't pull up a file on anybody and say, this is what he likes, this is what he eats, this is what he does, this is the type of girl he likes, this is the type of porn he looks like on the internet. So if we get a girl that looks like that to go over around there and do this for him or whatever, therefore, do I own that person? At that point in time, they probably do, without even having to do the old thing of the honeypot where they actually have to have sex with you. It's just, at this point in time, they know how to push your buttons so bad that you can't even help but react. And I'm guilty of that. And it's just like anything else, It's like, how many times have I been on Facebook and you look at that and you go, oh man, that's exactly what I want right there. And I click on it and I assist in that way of doing it. Of course, we all think we're too smart, that we all think we're smarter than our own brains. That's part of the problem too. But we're not. Because our reptilian brain is what it is. We're not smarter than our brain. We're just not. If we were smarter than our brains, I should be able to say in my brain, stop my heart, and it should stop, but I can't, because it's a normal reaction that my brain is telling that. I can't overrule that. And so anyway, that went dark. That went
Yeah, it's pretty easy to go that direction, but Facebook is scary because, you go and you post pictures, automatically it puts a square around the face and it starts to tag that person for you. Before you even put the name in, the name is already there. So what sort of technology is out there? And they're putting cameras everywhere for the facial recognition. Like anywhere you go, basically, especially in a big city, they have this facial recognition technology going on. And like you're saying, they're picking up on things that you really want. Oh, I really want that. And you'll click on it. You kind of just fell for it, like the monkey hitting the button to get the banana or whatnot. We're just falling for it.
Yeah. It's almost a Pavlovian response. And I think that's human nature. That's who we are. And there's no point beating ourselves up over it. But we do have to be aware of the fact that that's one of those things. I mean, whenever people say to me, well, I wouldn't fall for that. I didn't vote for that person because I fell for something. You necessarily wouldn't be able to overdo that. But we do live in this weird kind of a society. I'm a British citizen. So last time I went through Heathrow Airport, I didn't even need my passport. I just went through this thing and looked at this camera and walked right through. That my biometrics are into that machine to the point where I don't even have to do anything but look straight ahead and walk through something, and I can get into the country. Now, is that freaky or what? You know what I mean? So is that you know, at what point in time do we realize that we are willingly and we don't have a choice in it? I mean, in some ways we willingly do it. In some ways we don't have a choice. If you want to travel to another country, you got to give them a picture that's a biometric picture. You've got to have an RFID chip in your passport. You've got to have this. You've got to have that. I mean, that's different. I'm not, you know, I'm not talking in terms of Americans, but I'm sure Canadians are the same way. You know, they're probably way more logged into the system as far as that than Americans are, even though that they think that they aren't. But, you know, like, you know, I've been part of the biometric matrix in Britain for forever and a day. You know, Americans, certain states fight that and everything like that. But, since 2011, I don't think you have a lot of choice in that matter. I honestly don't think you have a lot of choice after that type of thing to not comply to the system. But then again, you say, okay, well, that's fine. I'm just never going to travel to another place, you know. But then you have this computer on you that basically, I mean, we willingly subject. I've had this argument with people sometimes where they say, I'd never be chipped. I can't imagine being chipped. You know, that's like, it's against my religion and everything like that. And then they whip out their iPhone and then they start tweeting or whatever. And it's
You're like, what is that? Well, you're chipped right there.
Yeah, it's not under your skin, but guess what? I couldn't live without my iPhone is exactly what you just said. You know, I just couldn't live without it. And so that's one of those things where, you know, we do have to be aware of the fact that convenience comes at a cost. And, you know, we have to be aware of those different types of things. And maybe that's what relating to nature and everything about is so good for people. You know, a lot of times people say to me, well, you know, I want to go find Bigfoot. And I say, okay, well, you should go out and do that. And mainly a lot of it has to do with, people say, where do you go? And I tell them, I go to Mountain Loop Highway by Granite Falls in Granite Falls, Washington. That's where I go look for Bigfoot. One of the things that's awesome about that place out there is it's about 8 miles away from my house. And it's about 150 years back in time, because once you go down the hill from Granite Falls, there is no cell service for about 100 miles. And so you can't get radio interference into there. You can't do anything like that. You are as free as I think you could be in today's society, being so close to that. And it's awesome, you know, for that. And it's worth it just to go for that. It's also worth it because I think because of the fact that it's like going back in time and nobody ever goes up there. It's 3/4 of the county that I live in and nobody ever goes there that past a certain spot. It's prime for that type of thing. If Bigfoot exists, and I believe that it does, that's where it would be. On the breast of the Cascade Mountains, you know, at the crest on this side. And, because you can travel all the way from British Columbia to Oregon to the Columbia River without being seen. I mean, you could literally do that in those mountains. And so you've got tons of land to do that. And most people think that Washington doesn't have that much kind of stuff, but they don't think about it in the terms of that. I remember whenever I moved to Washington State, and I remember I was living in Ohio, and it was like people were thinking, okay, yeah, did they still have cowboys and Indians out here? And it is like that, but it is one of those things where if anything could live anywhere in here, primarily British Columbia, and down through the Rockies is that. And I believe that that's one of the things that we don't talk about, that because there are not a lot of people who go into that. It's like we literally think that people step foot on every little inch of the woods. Well, I'm pretty sure that I've been in areas of the woods that are off the beaten path that nobody has been in for hundreds of years, and but that's the way that goes. And the same in Colorado. Whenever you get to that certain area around sort of like the Gunnison and those places that are high up in the mountains, like Snowmass on the other side of Aspen, that's one of those things where, I remember being up there for a long time. I used to do Jeep tours up on the backside of Aspen on the other side of Snowmass. And, people coming down and saying, oh man, there's something chasing us in the woods and everything like that. And I was, I haven't always been an open-minded guy, so I made fun of them. I said, Bigfoot's not real. That's stupid. That I was 19 at the time. And I'm like, I picked these people apart, and I really literally was the type of person that I hate the most, which is good, I think, because you have to have that juxtaposition in your life to say that was wrong. That the way that was, I feel sorry for those people. And then I didn't see anything up there for years and years and years. And I went up there for a long time. And then that's whenever I saw it on the back thing. The thing that they said happened to them happened to me. And it was like karma. It was like, that's definitely the way it is. But it was good in the way that I had been up there for years and known exactly what had been there. I'd been around bears. I'd been around all kinds of different wildlife, porcupines, all the things that were up there, marmots, whatever. And so I was very cognizant about tracks and everything like that. And I'd had bears sniff me and all kinds of different stuff up in the woods before. But this thing that came across was definitely unless some guy decided that he wanted to go up into 10,000 feet.
Where nobody's
park his
at.
car. Park his car like miles away. And he was like a 7-foot basketball player. And he wanted to hike around in the woods in a big hairy suit for that long to come across the road and do what he did. Hey, kudos to that guy if he's that fit. You know what I mean? Because it's hard to walk up a mountain at 10,000. It's really hard. I don't know. When I was young, I was a 14er, So in Colorado, you probably know what that means. A 14er is a person who actually has climbed over 14,000 feet in Colorado. And you can go up there and you can put your name inside this thing and you get a certificate from them because they go up and check it every once in a while. So that's kind of a rare thing. And a lot of people get hurt doing that. But, so, I was about it. And, like I said, I'd never heard it. It's just a weird scenario. And then all of a sudden after that, I did start to notice things that just didn't make sense. We were staying at this ghost town, and my kids were on the second floor. And, basically, so second floor in an old ghost town, that's got to, it's not the standard height of a ceiling. It's probably 7 or 8 feet. And, you add another bit onto that and put it. So this window's got to be at least 10 or 12 feet up, and my kid wakes me up at the window. Did you drop me again? Am I there?
Yeah, for a second. But then you came back, so that's good. I was like, oh no, here we go again. You're there.
So he's something scratching at the window. It's 12 feet up, and he says it's a bear outside. And and then you go outside, and he was convinced it was a bear. And I didn't say anything to him until like several years later. And I said, you realize that a bear couldn't be up that high, right? That definitely wasn't a bear. And because he started giving me crap about liking Bigfoot, and he said, Dad, you're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing everybody in your family. Stop talking about Bigfoot. You didn't see a Bigfoot. That's that's that type of thing. And I'm like, well, do you not realize that doesn't make sense the way that you tell the story? Knowing the dimensions of that cabin, that couldn't have been a bear that was looking through the window. And then he sort of stopped, and then he realized that, man, it's not as cut and dried as he wants to make it. And I think that's one of those things where we do that sometimes. Is like, don't be so critical of somebody to say they didn't see something. We don't know what it is, a ghost or whatever. I've never seen a ghost in the classic sense that, it's like an apparition and I can define who it is and it's walking around. But I have seen things move, and I've seen things in the shadows move and act in a certain way. I hate to say the word shadow being, because I think in the ghost community that means something. Like it's a negative thing. But I saw a thing that looked like a human mist in a shadowy shape walking around. And so to say that, and I learned that at a young age, whenever I did that with those Bigfoot people, that I was just like, that's bull crap. That now it's like, now I expect it, which is good. Because I think in the way that now whenever I say that I experienced this or something like that, I know that there's people who's going to say, that's nuts, you're delusional and stuff like that. And I think that that's fine, because I think that saying the truth is important. And it really doesn't matter if a lot of people don't believe, if you're telling the truth. If you're telling the truth about that kind of stuff, certain people will believe you and certain people won't believe you. And if you can explain it in a different way, I'm open to that. If people can explain what's happening to me as not a UFO or not a Bigfoot or not a ghost or whatever, that makes sense, then I'm cool with that. But I think a lot of skeptics, what they do is they take one part of the story and pick it apart and say, well, that's a deer or that's a bear, but they don't take any of the other story into it. They just ignore that. I hate debunkers that ignore the story. They just say that's dust, or whatever. It's dust on your camera lens. But they don't say what the thing touched me. You know what I mean? Like, dust on the camera lens can't touch my neck, but that's how they address it. And in some ways we let them get away with that.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's easy to be skeptical, and sometimes it's healthy, to be a healthy skeptic, but I'm open-minded. That doesn't mean I'm going to fall for anything, but I like to hear somebody's story and what they've been through and what's going on there. Our house is quite active. We have all kinds of stuff happen here basically on a daily basis. Today I'm sitting there in a chair going through my Facebook, and all of a sudden the pack of water that I just picked up from the store lifts up off the bed and sits back down and almost falls off the daybed that's there in the living room. And I was like, holy crap, I told my husband, I just saw the water lift off the bed and collapse back down and almost fall off the bed. Nobody was near it. So that was quite interesting. Somebody over here on Periscope is saying that they actually saw a shadow being in here. I'm like, what exactly did you see? I've seen shadow people in this house. When we first moved in here, we had a ghost by the name of John who passed away here from emphysema. But, I mean, there's so many things that can happen, and if it hasn't happened to you, just wait, like it could. I don't know. I'm just really open-minded, and I'm not against anything like that, because every time I say never or it won't happen, something like that does happen to me. So it's pretty interesting.
Exactly. It's like it's a funny thing. I've always believed that people, the energy is released from people whenever they die. I've always believed that, but the thing that always is really, really makes the most difference to me is when I don't know that person has died and something happens. And that's happened to me twice in my life, where I've seen what I interpret to be that family member or friend. One was a family member, one was a friend. One had actually passed away for half an hour and was resuscitated. He was on a machine the whole time, but was brain dead, or not brain dead, but he was coming in and out of the death process for that long. And basically I'd seen that. I didn't know that until the next day. But this being came, and the shadow, it was a shadow. It had sort of a human form, came, and I didn't feel any kind of malevolence or anything like that. Basically looked over my wife, because it was the relative of my wife that had passed before they were revived, and then walked right through the wall. And then another time, unfortunately a friend of mine, he was a Marine, committed suicide, and when he shot himself in the head, I felt like I was having a stroke, and my wife said, "There's something wrong. There's something in here with us." And she said, "It's walking around you and coming over to that point." And so we left it at that point in time. They didn't let us know until 2 days later that he unfortunately killed himself. But, that's the type of things where I don't know how to explain it in any other way. It's not like I knew that he had died, and so therefore, I'm imagining that this could happen, and that's what most people could say. It's the being able to feel that disturbance of energy around, a family member that is a conundrum to me, and I don't know if that has anything to do with some of the different spiritual training or beliefs I have or whatever, but I just people can say it's coincidence and those two things just happen and that's just the way it is and whatever. But to people who tell me these different types of stories, I want to know what the experience and how it is. Now, when I try to talk about these things, I want to know a lot more than the average person does about this scenario. In other words, I'd like to know what temperature it was, whether it was after a magnetic storm, where it was, and those types of things, because I think that I find that if you look at sightings of UFOs, Bigfoot all over, anecdotally, people used to say, well, that happens around gold mines. There's a lot of times you'd see these Bigfoot outside of silver mines, gold mines. This is kind of a thing. And then people thought, well, are they living in the mines or whatever? And to me, you do these different searches of the geology in the area. If there's a lot of gold claims, there's usually a lot of quartz in the ground. And if there's a lot of quartz in the ground, you're going to start having strange occurrences. And so that's the thing that really goes. I mean, that seems to me is a thing. So I've been on expeditions with certain people and you see lights and you see these, what we term as fairy lights floating around in the woods and all these different types of things and everything like that. And so people come to the conclusion that Bigfoot and UFOs are related. Well, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. But I will say, just like an oasis in the desert, a lion and an elephant go there to drink water, you know. It doesn't mean that they're related to each other in any way, shape, or form other than they're there for something. And could that be there for energy? Could that be there for the energy provided by the stones, the megaliths, the menhirs, these different types of things? Is that what that is? I think that if you ever did a research on, if they ever let you see research on Skinwalker Ranch, I bet you would see that things are so different in the way that they change and everything like that, that it's like a menagerie of weird experiences. It's like, it's almost too unbelievable that you have a UFO, and then you have a Skinwalker, and then you have a Bigfoot, and then you have this, and then you have that. Is it because they are attracted to the same source of sort of spiritual energy, if not spiritual energy, actually magnetic energy? Or is it that people are seeing these things due to an overloading of EMF? I mean, and that's something we have to be cognizant about too. I mean, that's whenever you're doing, ghost hunting and stuff like that, you have to say, oh, is there some kind of a source of energy there that's causing your pineal gland to secrete DMT, and therefore, is that what you're doing? Are you hallucinating? I mean, that's the interesting thing about DMT, and Graham Hancock talks about that, is that if you experience something on DMT, it goes into your brain as a memory, and so therefore it's reality to you. Even though you didn't experience, it is reality, and if you were to swear on a stack of Bibles or take a lie detector test, it will come out that that is what happened, even if it didn't happen. So then you have to get into the whole nature of what is reality.
And
are we living
have
in
to cut you off again. We got to go to our second break already. I can't believe we're there already. But we'll be right back right after these messages with Kevin Beagle. See you guys in a few.
Come get spooked at the 4th Annual Forest Moon Paracon in Cedar-Woolley, Washington, Saturday, September 28th. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot. Speakers include Mike Morin and Jason Jordan, R. Keith Andrews, and Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and so much more. There will be workshops and a VIP roundtable. Get early bird tickets now at fmparacon.com.
Coming up this September 21st and 22nd, all UFO eyes will be focused on Toronto for the 4th Annual Alien Cosmic Expo. Come listen to some of the biggest names and experiencers in ufology: Travis Walton, Paul Hellyer, Richard Dolan, Paula Harris, Grant Cameron, Randy Kramer, and Spaced Out Radio's own Dave Scott. Tickets are on sale now at aliencosmicexpo.com.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for a night on the town? The Moose Vancouver is the bar that never stops rocking until 2 a.m. every night. The Moose has great food with everything on the menu from $6.95 to $8.95. Fantastic, vibrant staff and rock and roll that will bring you back to when the music was real, the hair was long, and the guitars were rockin'. Get your party on at the Moose Vancouver, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Come tune in to SOR, where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother Is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com, where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com, and remember, Little Brother Is Watching.
Come get spooked at the 4th Annual Forest Moon Paracon in Cedar-Woolley, Washington, Saturday, September 28th. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot. Speakers include Mike Morin and Jason Jordan, R. Keith Andrews, and Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and so much more. There will be workshops and a VIP roundtable. Get early bird tickets now at fmparacon.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Hi there, this is Geraldine Orozco from San Francisco's Bay Area Meditation. I invite you to join me the first Tuesday of every month with Dave Scott for Spaced Out Radio's The Spiritual You. In this fast-paced world we live in, it's time for you to take some time for you. We'll cover every possible subject from powerful meditation to healing techniques to your own intuition and spirituality. So come join us for The Spiritual You.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Come hang out with Spaced Out Radio, where we own the night. This is Carl. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and during the show, use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio to chat with us live. On Instagram, at Dave Scott SOR. On Facebook, give our page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. SOR archives are free on YouTube at Spaced Out Radio. Come join us, or I will come join you. See you at your window.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
We are getting ready to relaunch the SOR Space Travelers Club at spacedoutradio.com. For $5 a month, you can join us for a plethora of features found nowhere else. Hang out in a private chat room during the show and after party. You can check out some exclusive content and a store specifically for you, as well as a private listener forum where you can post your thoughts, stories, and pictures. The SOR Space Travelers Club, coming soon to spacedoutradio.com.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and I want you to come on a nightly journey. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, every Monday through Friday, you can come hang out with me and the other space travelers. We have it all from Carl the Alien bouncing on by to those misfit gnomes causing havoc. It's 3 hours of fun and entertainment on those topics the mainstream really doesn't want to touch. Come get all paranormal with us at spacedoutradio.com, and together, my friends, along with our resident guitar god Bumblefoot, we own the night.
Sit back, relax, grab a drink, and listen closely. Spaced Out Radio continues through the weekend. From the mile-high mountains of Colorado to you, listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Weekend with Tessa Nicole Thomas.
Welcome back, guys. So great to have you this evening. Tonight we are joined by Kevin Beegle. Kevin, welcome back. It's been great having you this evening.
Oh, thanks, Tessa. I wish people could hear what we talk about during the break. It's you know, we had like you were telling me about some of the stuff that you were working on as far as your Four Corners Paranormal group, and man, that's amazing. You know, that's one of the things I found about doing these things. Sometimes whenever you're the host, you never get to talk about that, and it's too bad. But in the contest of doing that, I lost the thought of what we were talking about before. But anyway, I did see that in here, Nikki had asked a question: "Is what's my take on underground UFO bases?" And so that was one of the things I was just reading through there at the time, and I guess I'll start from there. Totally, yeah, I believe that that's true, and I think it's cognizant with folklore and everything like that. Of course, for a long time, we've talked fairy lore talks about fairies that live under the ground. Fairies live under the ground; they come up out of the ground. The entrance to the fairy gateway is under the ground. So basically, if you take old ancient lore, it totally makes sense. And it still makes sense that they would be under the water or under the ground, which is funny because old ancient ideas about where the gods lived was underwater primarily. In other words, you could see for a lot of things that around lakes were revered as places that the gods lived, and if that's true, and UFOs are submersible, which there is no reason to believe that they wouldn't be. If you could transfer through time and space, you could be underwater. So yeah, I totally believe that. You know, one of the things that's an interesting story is the children of Whitby. The Children of Whitby is an English story about these green children who came out of the ground, I think, around medieval times. That's an old legend of these things. There were two children that came out. They talked about how they lived under the ground, and that they had sort of been brought up to that location by somebody, and they didn't last very long, unfortunately, whenever they did make it to the surface of the planet. But it's an old story. Now, what's interesting is I've heard that story being told two ways, which is that it's a UFO story, and the other one is it's a fairy story. So the way that I read it, which is kind of, I mean, I actually understand Middle English, so that's how much of a nerd I am. Okay, but anyway, so, but whenever you look at that, that's one of those things that you do, you read into it, whatever you want to read into it. They didn't come from outer space; they came from under the ground, and so I think for a long time, although you have old depictions of art and everything like that shows spaceships in space and coming around and old etchings and things like that, I think that it was understood that those things were living within the planet, and I wouldn't see that there would be any different from that now. Of course, you've got I'll talk about Mount Adams a little bit, because on the Yakima Reservation, and people who go to Isetti Ranch down by in Washington, down by Mount Adams, they talk about a portal opening up, a base opening up inside that inside the side of the mountain. That same thing is talked about in Tibet. There's a holy mountain that's supposed to be the home of a god that has that same feature that supposedly opens up and things fly in and out of it. So what was interesting to me when the UFOI team were doing their Mount Adams, documentary, I went there to help. I'm not much of a researcher per se, as much as if somebody needs So if somebody needs a historical context and folklore, I'm your guy. But, I don't really need to go with those things. But I do have a lot of different research equipment, and I was going to let some of the people borrow so that was that. And so when Michael talks about his abduction, I was with him when that happened. But but one of the things what's interesting of it is I stayed there a few days afterwards, and I was driving down the mountain, and you know how it is, things happen for a reason. And I stopped because there was a lady that had broken down on the side of the road down from Takalak Lake down to Randall. And I stopped to make sure they were okay. There was a whole car full of people, and they all happened to be Native Americans. I asked them, hey, do you need anything? They said, no, our family's going to the reservation. And you got to understand, half of Mount Adams is on the Yakima Reservation, half is not. And so they were driving around the reservation. They were going to come back and pick her up. Well, we went down to town, came back. They still hadn't been back yet. So we all just sat down and had a meal. I talked to her about, teaching on the reservation and stuff like that. And she took to my wife really well. And she said, what are you guys up here doing anyway? And I said, well, our buddies are making a movie about Bigfoot and UFOs coming out of Mount Adams, And she said, oh yeah, they do. I mean, that was just there was no doubt about it. And then she also said that, this is something I don't think I've ever said. She said, oh yeah, Mount Rainier does that too. In other words, that in their spiritual belief that Mount Rainier and Mount Adams have landing spots for UFOs, and they have for forever and a day. And that's kind of an interesting thing, because Kenneth Arnold, whenever he sees the flying saucers flying around before Roswell even gets started, is over Mount Rainier. And that space in between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams. And so, it's a very funny thing. Sometimes you, when you're talking to people, you say, some people will say, oh, I can't talk to Native Americans and they'll tell me anything. Well, and I've taught on reservations. I know a lot of people like that, and so they have to assess you. They kind of like give you that stone-faced look for a long time, to try to kind of suss you out, and they do. They look at you and they kind of go into it. And as I said before, they've given me information about certain Bigfoot characteristics and UFO stuff. That is interesting, and like I said, I said this to you off air. One of the questions that they asked me about was, are you going to write a PhD about Bigfoot or UFOs? Which would be kind of an interesting thing, waste of money in my opinion. But no, I don't want that. And they said, have you ever written a book about Bigfoot? No. Are you ever going to write a book about Bigfoot? No. Okay, now I'll tell you. That's the thing. That was kind of the story about it is they need to know that you're going to honor their tradition in a way. And it's an interesting thing when you go to see the oldest representations of programs about Bigfoot, which like In Search of with Leonard Nimoy and things like that, The native people were very, very upset about the idea of even looking for it to take a picture of it, and there's a poignant scene in that where the Native American says they're just peaceful people. They want to be left alone. I feel sad that people are going out there and even taking pictures of them or trying to take them. And they found that as being hunting. And so that hunting behavior, is kind of a thing, and that's honestly kind of an interesting scenario to go with, because I think of a lot of the times that people are very protective of that. Whether they're if you think that they're soul bearers and you have an interaction with these group of people, I think that a lot of people who believe in Bigfoot and have developed a relationship with Bigfoot, all of a sudden you'll never hear from them again. You know, for a long time you see them on the internet, and then they're like, okay, yeah, this is what you do. How would I find this? How would I do that? I think I'm having some kind of relationship with these things. I think they're on my property, and then they disappear. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're like, I can't. It's like, would you give up your brother for $1 million, type scenario that you're in? It's almost like these people are family. They trust you. You at that point in time have to have your well-being and their well-being tied together. And so they just disappear. They just never talk about it again. You don't see them at conferences anymore. They don't talk about this different types of stuff. And it is an interesting type of thing that, it's culturally speaking. I mean, even if I knew where Bigfoot was, I wouldn't tell anybody. I mean, that's the honest thing. I'll hypothetically talk about it till the day I die and prove nothing. That's honestly my take on it. And so same thing with UFOs. I think that's a very, very big in the way of creation stories, as far as where how we get here, and they honestly believe, and there's no reason to believe that they're not right, that they've been visited for forever and a day. So yeah, I know that's a long way of answering that question, Nikki, but I do believe there's underground bases. I don't necessarily know whether the government has anything to do with that or not. I don't know. I don't comment on governmental stuff because, again, a lot of the times, just like as we've talked before, I think a lot of these things that are told to us are for multiple purposes. Maybe some of them are told to us as means of distraction. And so we'll go with that.
And we do have several other questions in the chat room. Trippin' Fool was asking, have you heard anything on the ghost James Stanley stolen from Ye Old Man in Scythe pub? He goes on to say it's a British pub, claims its ghost was stolen, demands Chinese artists return it. Lu Ping Yuan said the ghost agreed to be captured for an art exhibition. The Ye Old Man in Scythe, a 765-year-old pub in Bolton, England, claims it was haunted by the ghost of James Stanley, the 7th Earl of Derby, who was beheaded outside the pub in 1651.
I don't know about that case specifically, although I will say this, that whenever you're dealing, Bolton is an area that is a very, very traumatic place. Whenever you're talking about kind of upheavals in English history, Bolton's a little bit farther away from Manchester. If you know where Manchester, England, you know where Bolton is. It's a little bit north of that. But this is not uncommon for people to have stories that deal with that kind of demonic situation. I know that the Old Ram's Inn in England is one. That's one place I'm more familiar with. I've been there, and they almost believe that there's a demonic part of that. It is interesting to realize that I not specifically that location or how that works, but I do believe that you can move a spirit within a box. I think that sometimes they're described as almost Divic boxes. I'm not an expert in this, but Divic boxes are a way to hold a spirit within it and to keep it contained. There was an interesting story about a Divic box being sold on eBay and it causing a huge problem. And so it ended up with several different people, and it causes a whole lot of trauma. But when we're talking about those different types of things, historic places like that, they can be terrifying. I mean, but the thing about it is if you own that location, do you say the story or do you not say the story? I almost say it's worth it saying it, because more people want to stay in that room than they don't, or that location, that side of it.
Yeah. It's funny because I went around Main Street. I was going to do a haunted history tour, and I wanted to know everybody's experiences along Main Street. And the right side of the road, almost everybody had experiences. On the left side, basically nobody. And it was said back in the late 1800s, if you were going down the right side of the road, you were up to no good, because that's where, the working girls were, or the hidden pubs and such were. And on the other side were businesses. And so it's funny how there's more activity over here and basically nothing over here. And there's a hotel in particular that we talked to, and it's the Strater, which is very haunted. And they didn't want to admit that they were haunted because they were afraid that people wouldn't want to stay there. But I think that in this day and age, it's so something that people want to do. People really want to go out and ghost hunt and have these experiences. And so I think it would be valuable to them to advertise it as a haunted location, because they'd get a whole different genre of people in there. And I think it would impact their business greatly.
I think you're right in the fact that, I'm friends with an owner of an Irish bar in Seattle. And this location of this bar is the old Seattle mortuary. And it's haunted as hell. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. I don't have to be sensitive to know that place is haunted. So there was a big debate within the family about doing it, and I said, yeah, you should do it, because if it's happening, it's happening. And so they ended up being on Ghost Adventures or something, and it was interesting but and I know that place is haunted. Whenever I was talking before, I said I've never seen a ghost, but I've seen things move, and I have seen that location, seen things knocked off the bar and just moved around and everything like that. And actually, one of the things I was surprised about, I'm not Catholic. I was raised Presbyterian and also in a Druidic faith. But I will say that they moved the Movina. Is that what you call it in America? The statue of Mary Magdalene. They moved that too, and I didn't think that was possible, but I guess it is. So I guess I mean I don't really know that much about ghosts, like I said, but whenever you see things move and you hear these stories and you hear other people tell you these types of things, I definitely believe it. That being said, I was at a place in Ireland one time in Carrickfergus. And across the road, there was a lady that was supposedly killed in one of the rooms by somebody who was at the castle. And I went up there to go into that room. I took my son in with me. He was, again, sort of not a believer in anything. And he went into the bathroom, got touched by something, and shot out of there like a shot and said, and I basically came down the stairs and he was outside having a pint. And so I don't know, but people, but how do you, I think in that case, if you feel like you're being touched malevolently or not, that makes the determination. I think that a lot of people would love that experience, I mean, they'd pay money for that experience if they could feel like that was happening. But, sometimes when you're in the hotel rooms with the ladies of, the people who were, prostitutes or whatever, and they were murdered or whatever, or the murderer of the prostitute hangs in that room, you've almost got to get that out, but you don't want to feel like I'm waking up in the middle of the night being choked, So it's a double-edged sword. I don't know how to answer that. It's an interesting question, but I would think that I would err on the side of I have a ghost hotel.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there is help out there where you can get rid of the unwanted spirits. As far as the Durango-Silverton Railroad goes, they have mostly good spirits, but there is one bad one that likes to hang around. If we could get rid of that guy and keep the good ones around, that would be awesome. And they're very protective of their ghosts, of Kate and Emmy, and one they call Legs. And that's so cool when you see that interaction and that connection between people in the spirit realm, for them to be able to have that relationship is pretty awesome. They're both protective of each other, and so that's pretty cool. Shar was wondering, how do UFOs know what you're thinking or saying, i.e. come over here, etc., etc.?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I almost think that extraterrestrial craft predominantly is biomechanical. And people say, well, how is that possible? Whatever. It's almost like the machine has the thing inside it, because of course we always assume that if something's coming from another location, it's going to have 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, which, sort of statistically speaking, is not really probably all that accurate. In other words, a being could be a blob and still have intelligence and things like that. So it's almost like I always give the example of like Battlestar Galactica, the last Battlestar Galactica, where they were almost these sort of biomechanical things that were traveling around, and the spaceships and that, had beings inside them that controlled it. They were hooked into that and type of thing. And I believe that from that standpoint, whether it's our way of transmitting energy to other people or whatever, I think they can pick up on our brainwaves just as much as anything. Of course, our thought is electrical thought. In other words, our brain works on a low voltage electrical system. And so because of that, with a sensitive enough way of doing it, there's no way to say that either through vibrational systems or whatever, that they couldn't do it. In other words, take dogs, for example. A dog doesn't see the way we see, and they have to have whiskers if you cut off a dog's whiskers, they'll walk into the wall. Cats will do that. They'll fall down. They don't do it. Part of the way that they actually see is to interpret vibrations. And so we're being awfully kind of interesting to see that the way that other things perceive us is based on how we perceive it. But then on the other hand, a lot of us believe in teleportation, or not teleportation, telepathy, and to say, can I transfer this thought to you? I mean, that's one of those things where, everybody has a story like that. I knew that person was going to call before they called me. I knew that I knew you were going to show up. I knew that I had to call you right now and do all these different types of things. Is that an example of telepathy? I don't know. But from that standpoint, whether telepathy exists or we're all collected to the collective consciousness, that's something that I think that we have to understand. When we do art, and you talk to scientists and you say, well, how did you come up with that? And they say, I don't know. It just came to me. We don't think that's crazy whenever an artist says, how did you write that song? It just came to me in a dream. Or how did you solve that solution? It came to me in a dream. How did that happen? This is that sort of universal consciousness that maybe we're hooked into. And, maybe they're just better attuned at reading that than we are. That's it. I don't know the answer to that specifically, but that would be my guess. I can't hear you.
It's funny, because I had a telepathic experience with a dark entity in my room that was, excuse me, darker than the dark, and I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. It was kind of like sleep paralysis, but I could hear what he was saying, and he could hear my thoughts back to him. He was basically saying that he was going to have me. I told him he couldn't. He laughed, and then leaned over and kissed me, and when he did, it sent a shock through my body, all the way from my head to my toes, and then all of a sudden I could kick my feet. And my husband woke up and saw it and reached over and grabbed me, and then that broke the whole being frozen thing. But I do believe telepathy is real, and a lot of times I'll say something that somebody's thinking or whatnot. My husband oftentimes will say, "Get out of my head." And I'm not intentionally doing it. I just have these random things come to me, and I'll say it, and it's what he's thinking or what somebody else is thinking. So it's pretty interesting. If we could just harness that, it would be amazing. It'd be a much quieter world, I think.
Yeah.
Nikki, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's okay. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was distracted by something, but that's okay.
Well, Nikki was saying, Kevin, I don't think you've been asked publicly, at least not to my knowledge yet, during the Mount Adams incident. Do you believe you were possibly taken too?
My understanding of it is that I don't know if I would say taken. I don't know. I'll explain to you what happened to me. Okay. And so I've sort of not talked about this because there's a question to me because I was dealing with this for the for somebody else that I don't want to screw up their party. In other words, it's like if they're going to discuss that in a movie, it's not fair for me to really talk about it too much. But I will say that when Michael woke up and went outside and believed that he was taken, I was in the camper that we were in. I was working on something. I specifically had asked Michael what time it was when he got up and his alarm went off. That's whenever his machine turned off. And so I started to work on changing over the batteries. I just got new batteries in the trailer because I wanted to see how long his machine would work on it. I was trying to figure out the whole machine part of it, and I had to switch over batteries for when he went out. So he went out, and when he was gone, I was working on this, and it seemed to me like I was in sort of a trance-like state. I don't know how to describe it. Almost like I don't. I looked at my watch, and it just seemed like time had slowed in some way. I don't know how to do it. I've been in situations where, I've been out, and it seems like I'm anesthetized in the woods sometimes. And a lot of times people explain that sometimes before they get abducted or have an encounter with Bigfoot or something like that. That's almost like there's no way you fight it. I've been anesthetized several times, but I will say that you just can't fight it. And this is what it was. I almost went into this weird semi-hypnotic state, and when he came back, I said to him specifically, "What time is it, Michael?" Because I wanted to note how long the battery had lasted before I switched it over, which was the only reason I would really pay that much attention to it. And so basically, he had come up with this time difference that was like an hour. I didn't feel like it was an hour. I felt like it was maybe a half an hour, which is interesting because my wife felt like it was 15 minutes. So in a weird story about it, we all felt different ways. And it was kind of anecdotal and things like that until we got to the next morning and we were talking to this other guy and he was like, yeah, I lost time last night. The one of the sound people for the thing, and we had all sat around the campfire the next morning, and we were all arguing about how much time we lost, and it was just a bizarre kind of a story where it was like 2 people thought it was an hour, 2 people thought it was 10 minutes, or 10 to 15 minutes. I thought it was half an hour. It was just really weird type of a thing where whether it was some kind of a dilation. I don't know if I have been taken. I haven't watched anybody else's regression or anything like that. I didn't want to. I didn't think it was fair because if I've never been regressed, I don't know if I'm comfortable with it. But if we were, I didn't want their sort of ideas of what had happened to go through. So that's what happened to me. I've never listened to Michael's story. I've never listened to the other people's stories about what happened. I can honestly say I have no idea what they say about it, whether they've been abducted or whether they weren't. I don't feel like I was. I said that at a time. I didn't say that, but I did experience time differences between what everybody else can explain. That's all I can say about it right now. I would be willing to be, I guess, regressed if people wanted to hear about that, but they've got their own stories to say, and that works for me.
So earlier we were talking about Bigfoot and how a lot of times they're found around mines, and when you said that, I found it really interesting. We own a security company, and we did a gig up in Rico, Colorado, guarding a mine because they were taking out all the toxic chemicals that were in there and holding them in containers, and people would go up there and target practice, so we were just basically keeping them from shooting these things up, and we do it overnight, during the day, so on and so forth, and there were different sounds heard. There were giant boulders being tossed off the side of the mountain. And we had a African-American / Native American guy working up there, and he basically refused to leave the vehicle. He's like, no way, Haas, no way am I leaving this vehicle. And it was interesting because they're trying to write it off as a bear or whatnot, and I'm like, you guys, bears don't throw boulders. Like, they might knock things off the side of the mountain or whatnot, but they're not going to be tossing boulders down the side of the mountain. So later on we went up there and did an investigation at the Enterprise Bar and Grill in Rico, Colorado, and the very next day I was like, I want to go up to where this mine is and see if I can find any evidence of Bigfoot, and I did find several footprints which were in some gravel, so it was harder to see, but I marked it at the top and bottom and put my foot next to it and took pictures and whatnot, and we went back down to the Enterprise, and I'm telling them what I found, and a mother and daughter came up and started talking to us about how they would sit out on their back porch and have coffee, and one day, in this clearing of aspen trees, they saw not only a Bigfoot, but an albino Bigfoot. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Not per se, not an albino Bigfoot. I've heard of a blonde Bigfoot, but not an albino one. But that doesn't mean that it's not. It would seem like if from that standpoint, Yetis are supposedly white, so I would imagine that from that standpoint, it would make sense that I have no reference on that one to say it, but it's interesting that from that standpoint, what I would want to know is, Tessa, from you, because this is kind of a curious thing. has anybody ever talked to you about old mines, like making noises and grinding noises and machinery noises, even though there's no equipment in there or anything like that? Is that something that it's almost like it's something I'd like to track, because I've lately been hearing about Bigfoot reports and these mines where there's like a mechanical grinding noise that's coming out of mountains. And I don't know if they're related or anything like that, but people say that it's like a machinery noise where there's old mines or old places like that, and people can't figure out where that power would come from. I mean, there's no generators or anything up there or any way of doing it. I don't know, but that totally makes sense that I would believe that if I was a Bigfoot, I'd live in a mine. Because that's how that would be. An old mine would be big enough for them to do. That would be definitely interesting for winter stuff. If they stay in that same location, which there's a lot of debate about whether they would have to move up and down into the valley. And if they don't move up and down out of the mountains at that altitude, I mean, they're going to be under snow for about 6 months out of the year, I would imagine. So that's a lot of things that we have to work on and try to figure out, because snowfall up in that area, which leads me to believe again that they're more human-like than simian, in the fact that they would need to be able to store some sort of food product for winter or whatever, or they hibernate or what have you. I don't know. I mean, to talk about that, it's an interesting thing. I did some research on, in Europe, there was a lot of people actually used to take what was called the big sleep in Northern Europe, and because of the cold, and what would happen is that they would basically go into a semi-hibernetic sleep pattern for months out of the year, because and basically what would happen is they would store up food, they'd sleep as much as possible, roughly just eat as minimally as they would, and go back to sleep. And that's well documented in places like France and north of France. And so I kind of hypothesize, is that what Bigfoots have to do too? I mean, are they they're not active in the wintertime because of the fact that they have to almost adopt this sort of semi-hibernetic approach.
And that would make a lot of sense if they did hibernate, or like you said, a semi-hibernation during the winter, because what else would they be eating unless they were able to capture or hunt certain animals? But you don't really hear of a lot of sightings during the winter. You don't see or find Bigfoot tracks, so that is very interesting and could be the answer to that. Why don't we see them during the winter? Why don't we find tracks? Perhaps they're hibernating like the bears are. But this mine, you were asking about noises and such, and there was a lot of crazy, strange noises coming from the mine. But at this point, I don't think anything was living in it, because they did put a gate in front of it so nothing could enter or leave without a key. So perhaps at one point it was living in there, but now it's living near it. So that's interesting as well.
Well, I think that's important, because and that's one of the things that is also true. And I don't think that we've done quite a lot of research. Unfortunately, with any sort of database of information, you don't necessarily know how accurate it is, and that's one of those things where, you've got the database. I mean, there's some competing databases for UFO stuff. There's some competing databases for Bigfoot stuff too. And so at some point in time, you can't make a statistical analysis of really anything. I do have a degree in statistics, and most of the data that we have is so anecdotal and to subjection that I don't know if you can necessarily predict a whole lot of this stuff anyway. But it would be interesting to see height and weights versus different types of things. Whenever I saw Bigfoot in Colorado, it was at the start of the summer. And this thing looked, like I said, looked like a basketball player, very tall, lean, not as you would imagine a heavy thing. So I almost thought that at that point in time it would have had to be hibernating because of the fact that it was so lean, and to have that kind of almost like you have to bulk up before the winter and then that comes off you, just like a bear does. They have to store body fat and everything like that. So I don't know, but it would be interesting to try to get that kind of information out. But again, this is one of the things where you and I and everybody who does this, we're doing this not for. I mean, let's face it. In the UFO world, there's probably 7 or 8 people who make a living off it. In the Bigfoot world, there's probably 3 or 4. And after Finding Bigfoot went away, probably less than that. And so we're all doing this research for kind of free. And so it's like we all have jobs. We all have to do all this. And so, it's very hard to dedicate that much time and effort into something unless you're, kind of wealthy enough to do this on your own. I imagine that with UFOs, that's a little bit better to for people to look into that, because there seems to be more of an interest in UFOs. I would say that the majority of people think that extraterrestrial life is possible, which it totally is, and if not likely. And so that's the thing where I think most people believe in UFOs. Most people believe in ghosts. About 25% of people believe in Bigfoot. So it's just never going to be the type of thing where it's hard to take a guy from downtown Seattle who lives in a city and say, "Do you think Bigfoot's real?" And they say, "Yeah." If you're not living out in the woods and you don't spend any time out in the woods and you don't know what it is, that's part of the issue too, is a lot of times people go out into the woods and would they know what a Bigfoot structure looked like? Would they know, that it wasn't a bear? Would they know that if it's smart enough? I did this as a experiment one time. I'm kind of like that. I went out to a campground up on Mount Rainier one time, and I talked to the park ranger, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang out by this bush, by the front entrance of this thing, and I'm just going to sit there. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to hide in the woods. I was 6 feet off the main road. And I have been trained in camouflage before, so I did have that on my side. But I was there for hours at a time, and people walked past me with their dogs, everything else like that. I didn't make any noise. I just sat there and done it. I wasn't under it. I didn't dig myself into the ground. I didn't do anything. I stuck myself between 2 trees and sat there and didn't move. And not one person ever came up with the idea that I was sitting there. And so it's interesting that people say, well, if there was Bigfoot out in the woods, I'd see it. I'd know. I can tell you that people drove past me in their cars, walked past in their dogs, got out of the thing, and paid their parking pass, paid their campground pass, and didn't see me. They had no clue I was there. So there's stuff in the woods that you don't know is there. And so to say that somebody has seen it or make fun of them is kind of a funny thing. That was an experiment I did, and I documented it with the camp ranger there and the people I was camping with. And again, nobody saw me. Nobody saw me there. And and that's something where, if it's possible for me to do it, I would imagine it's possible for somebody who's in the woods the majority of their life to do. You know,
They're probably like, I feel like I'm being watched. Who's watching me?
Well, yeah, nobody even made a comment like that. I mean, it was kind of an interesting thing, you know. You were in the Army, and they probably talked to you a little bit about, you know, the sixth sense, where you can feel like you're being watched. One of the things that they've said is that, you know, they always said to me, if you're observing somebody, don't keep eye contact on them for too long, even if they can't see you, because they said people will feel that you're watching them, you know, and people react to it. So like there's a break eye contact for a while if you're watching them, because otherwise some people are sensitive enough to believe that. Now, you know, is that written in a government manual anywhere? Probably not. But is that sort of one of those things that, you know, it's the tricks of the trade that sort of gets passed down from one to another? Yeah. You know, that's the type of thing where there's probably not a lot of documentation on it. Although I think what is interesting is now that we do now talk about these different types of programs that used to do this kind of things, you know, like remote viewers, and, you know, which is basically astral projection and those different types of things, and what is the human body capable of doing from that standpoint. And those are all things that our government, as well as other governments, were fully involved in trying to leverage the human mind as that, and so you know, for a long reason, you know, there's documented evidence that people located certain people who were kidnapped. So to pretend that that's all coincidental and, you know, telepathy isn't a real thing, or, you know, being able to see outside your body isn't a real thing, is kind of a silly thing to do. Is it accurate all the time? No, but that's because, I mean, even if you talk to anybody who is a medium or a psychic or anything like that, if you really kind of ask them what's your hit rate, they'll always say, you know, if you're really, really good, about 85%. About 85% of the time, you're good. You know, you get it right. About 15% of the time, it's wrong. Everybody has some kind of a capability of being better than chance. In other words, if you do it, you know, the average of being right whenever making a binary choice should always be 50-50 over time. Most people are better than that by 9% just on their own. And certain people can get to a point where, you know, 87% of the time that they're right, and sometimes they're wrong. And that's the thing that's important to realize, is that, yeah, it's not a 100% science where you can get into the thing of why somebody's wrong, but sometimes it's why the thing is wrong is because something else could be interfering with it. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm not that accurate whenever that's done. I've done that kind of testing to see how I did, and you know, but. You know, that's one of those things where, you know, we have to be able to look at that. But that's that whole globalized, whole view of the paranormal that we have to get into. Is it that paranormal to begin with, to understand that we're all created as being part of the universe or not? I don't know. Is the paranormal part, or the out of the normal part, to think that we can't do it, or is that the point? I mean, it's almost to me like to tell somebody that you can't do this type of thing is the abnormal thing to do. I don't. That's my approach.
Yeah. I was actually in the Marines, and what they taught us was your common sense is your most important tool, and always be aware of your surroundings. I think the being watched thing is kind of just something that's naturally ingrained in us. Like, I can feel somebody watching me and look over and make eye contact with the person that's watching me, you know? Not everybody has that, and not everybody has common sense. It's not a flower that grows in everybody's garden. But I mean, I think the more that you work on it, the more you're able to pick up. And some people are just not really aware of a lot of things going on around them. They're either looking at their cell phone or at the trail ahead of them. And for me, I'm just like constantly on a pivot, especially when I'm out in the woods. I won't go out by myself because I won't let a bear come up and sniff me, you know. I'm afraid of being around bears, especially with the drought season, all the other things that we've gone through the past several years. Mountain lions and bears are getting very brave and going into places that they generally wouldn't, and interacting with not only people but pets, like taking pets and grabbing kids, and it's pretty scary. This year I hope is different. We got a lot of snow and a lot of rain this year, so hopefully it'll be a better year and we won't have to worry about our kids in the woods, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I unless you're talking about certain things, cats are always the thing that scares me the most, because as with everything, everybody says, well, anything that can climb up a tree and jump on you and you have no idea that it's happening, that's far more scarier than anything that's but that's us, right? Is that part of our the human experience too, is that we're supposed to be afraid of things that come from above? I mean, it's an interesting thing. Anecdotally, if I saw Mothman, I would be far more scared of that than almost anything else that could walk on the ground. I mean, the idea of a human coming from above, or any kind of a cryptid coming from above, is terrifying. I think that's just one of those things. I mean, imagine how we react to a bee, or a wasp, or a hornet, or even a horsefly or something. I mean, it's like that's a little thing that can inflict a little bit of pain, and yet we're horrified by it. It's like almost the weirdest thing that we could imagine that we're going to experience. Imagine if that was a bipedal thing with wings. I don't know how those people remained sane that had that. But anyway, there are people who are braver in the world than I am whenever it comes to experiencing those types of things. I guess you never know how you would react to something until it happens. And it's almost like that's one of the things that you always deal with people who see Bigfoot is, you say, well, this thing could have come out of the woods and killed me. And, and they're terrified of the experience. Which is interesting about when people see cryptids or these types of things in the woods, it seems to me like their long lasting reaction seems to be dictated by the first person they talk to. I mean, it's kind of like they don't know. Whenever you're a mom and I'm a dad, and you're watching your kid and it fell down, and they look at you and they don't know whether they're going to cry or not because they want to see how you react before they start crying. It's almost like that with a lot of cryptid things, and it's like if you have an experience. Now, this isn't always the case, and I'm making generalities here. So if this specifically doesn't apply to you, I'm not picking on you. But if you see something in the woods and then you come out and you talk to me and I'm like, that's awesome. I mean, can you imagine how honored that is to see a Bigfoot? That's the best thing. It stood in the road and let you look at it and everything else, versus you go to talk to somebody else where it's like the first reaction is, that thing could have killed you. It was huge. It was massive. It was everything else. That level of trauma that comes from it's like, I need to have permission to react in a certain way to this cryptid. And so the first person who talks to you about that cryptid sets your mindset about how you should react. I mean, it's so out of the ordinary that you don't know how to do it, and you almost need to have it. It's interesting because I've talked to police officers who've seen Bigfoot, and they were suicidal. They were seriously thinking that they were going to go out and kill themselves, and they saw Bigfoot, and that changed their life. That, for whatever reason, gave them hope or reason to understand that life is not the way that they see it, or whatever, and so therefore, it gave them a new lease on life to say that there's more to this world than I understand, and you go from that, and so you can't say so it. And I'm not saying that if something came at you, was snarling at you, and came and like ripped your tent open, that you shouldn't be scared. But in a lot of ways, they don't seem to come after most people. In other words, they might follow you for, like in the case of the people that saw it on the backside of Schofield Pass that I was talking about. They ended up being in a movie with Ron Moorhead, the guy who talks about quantum Bigfoot. So I felt good in the end. But anyway, I finally got to hear their whole story, and this thing had been following them for what they determined to be like 2 or 3 days, and they were terrified of it. But what was interesting about it is you don't get up, put up a tent, you don't put up a tent, go to sleep, see this thing running around after you, feel it following you all day, and then you put up your tent for the next day, and it's around in the middle of the night, and then it follows you down the mountain and everything like that. If it's following you for 2 days, it's not a threat. It's curious. It wants to know about you. Now,
well, I hate to do this, but we are at the end of our time, Kevin. Is there a way that our listeners can find you or contact you?
Yeah. So my name's Kevin Ian Beegle. It's KEVINIAN BEEGLE, and you can find me on Facebook. That's usually the best way to do it. Like I said, I don't have. I'm also part of the UFO team. If you want to find it that way, I'm sort of I'm not an investigator. I'm more of a person who comes in and gives perspective at times if you need that. And yeah, you can go ahead and contact me there. Anytime you want to ask me a question, that's fine. I do have some sort. I'll let you know. I do have some visual issues that I'm dealing with right now. So, and also another issue that I need to have with. So I have surgery next week, and so if I don't answer you or whatever, then it's not because I don't like you. I get a lot of requests from a lot of different people, and sometimes it gets pushed down the page and everything like that. But I will read what you say and respond. And hopefully everybody had a good time. And thank you so much, Tessa, for letting me talk.
Well, thanks so much for being my guest this evening and for sharing all your awesome and wonderful information. It's been awesome.
Well, yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you to everyone on Spaced Out Radio, Facebook, Spreaker, Twitter, wherever else in the universe you're listening tonight. I had a wonderful time this evening, literally and figuratively, and I can't wait to do it again next weekend on spacedoutradio.com. Don't forget, we are all in this together. Together we can make the world a little better, and together, my friends, we own the night. You guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'll see you back here next week on the flip side. Take care of my yous, and feel free to join us at the after party, 970-335-9596.